Working Cows Podcast, Episode 14.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
This episode has been brought to you in part by Kamak Ranch Supply. Check out their website at kamakranchsupply.com. This episode is also brought to you by chriswilliamsaudio.com. Head on over to chriswilliamsaudio.com for all your audio production needs. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Today on the Working Cows Podcast, we have Roland Kroos. Roland has been providing on-site assistance as well as teaching holistic management since 1986. He trained extensively with Alan Savory, founder of Holistic Management, in 1985, and is a recognized certified educator with Holistic Management International. He has witnessed the striking potential for positive change that can take place on landscapes and within operations with a little commitment to better planning and managing whole systems. Roland, thanks for joining me today. I'd like to give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself and share with people what it is you do and kind of what brought you to this place and the things that you've done leading up to what you're doing now.
Certainly, Clay. My name is Roland Kroos. I am a certified holistic management educator. I live just outside of Bozeman, Montana. I cover a multi-state area. I've got clients in Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana. I also have worked for a number of years in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and then Nevada, Idaho. So as you look at the region I cover, it's a fairly large region. I spend quite a bit of time on the road traveling. I'm right now doing actually some seminars in Wisconsin, working with some bison producers. So I've actually done seminars in almost every western state west of the Mississippi, and then I've been also done some seminars teaching holistic management seminars in some of the eastern states. So I've been doing this for 30 years. I met Alan Savory back in 1982, I believe, when I was working in Washington State, and that was a turning point in my life. I was intrigued with some of Alan's thoughts and concepts. In '84, I went to one of Alan's classes in holistic management down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. At the time, I was working for NRCS. And I was intrigued with the ideas. I went back and started working with a number of ranchers in north central Nebraska, around Mullen, Nebraska. Immediately had some profound success by working with these ranchers and practicing these management concepts. And I've been doing it since then, ever since. In '85, I trained with Alan Savory. I went back down to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and went through a very intensive 6-month training program to learn the concepts of holistic management and to be able to help my clients, which is ranchers and farmers across the western United States, practice these ideas. And I worked for holistic management from '85 to '92. In '92, I created my own consulting company called Crossroads Ranch Consulting. And I've been running my company, this consulting company, till now. And I've just brought on an associate, so where there's 2 of us working in my company, again, teaching and consulting in this management process called holistic management.
What are some of the principles of holistic management? You mentioned that you learned these principles from Alan Savory himself. We've talked about him a couple of times on the podcast, and I've linked at the show notes page for episode 5, I linked to his TED Talk. What are some of the principles of holistic management?
The main concept with the term holistic, and Alan spells it, if you get it, you purchase Alan's book, it's holistic with an H. As I work with my clients, I challenge them to put a W in front of it, in that what I've learned is we're managing whole ranch operations, which are fairly complex. When you start looking at who are the people involved in managing this ranch operation, it could be a simple 2-person, 3-person small family to multi-generational families with employees. So, I mean, again, as I work with ranch operations, the people facet can be fairly simple or it can be fairly complex. And then again, ranches are very dependent on, anyway, the ranches here in the United States are dependent on financial viability. And so I look at how the ranch is doing economically is what are the liabilities that this ranch is currently facing, and what are the assets? As we borrowed a certain amount of money to operate a ranch. So again, I really help ranchers analyze and look at the net worth. And then again, as we're talking about like goal setting, is what are the direction they'd like to see with their financial health and their financial picture. And so I will help break down with the number of ranch operations. Is if they're involved in multiple enterprises, we'll do an economic assessment of each enterprise, saying what are the direct costs, direct or variable costs to this particular enterprise. Like a livestock operation, you're going to have a certain amount of feed you may have to purchase. You're going to have certain animal health costs, and so I'll help break that down. And then we'll look at how that's contributing to helping to pay for the overheads on the ranch. And the last aspect is the land aspect. Again, most ranches are fairly sizable. Some of them could be like your operation, from a couple hundred acres to multiple thousand acres. But the size really doesn't it makes it, I guess it can add to greater complexity on that, because the larger you get, the more challenges you may have. But even a fairly small ranch operation of only 1,000 or 2,000 acres can, as we look at the terrain, the landscape, the wildlife, the bugs that live in the soil. And so as we throw all these things together, and I'm going to we throw it in a cement mixer and mix it all together, and it's all interacting, that's called a ranch. And so it's fairly complex and can be challenging to provide ranches assistance. So that's what I specialize in, not specifically one entity. I specialize in helping people understand their whole complex situation and how everything is interconnected.
Where do the animals come into that equation as far as the holistic management is concerned? Is that more under the land heading, or do they have their own separate, or the production, I guess, enterprises?
Right. It'll come in two plays on that, Clay. I'll look at it when we get into the finances. We'll break it down. I'll start asking, okay, when are you calving? How much hay are you feeding? How are you managing these livestock with a health protocol? And then it also comes into play when we start looking at the land. Is how, again, these animals are having an impact on the land, and how we manage that impact can either be very beneficial or it could be detrimental. And so but in a sense, it's kind of that fourth area that. Like I said, I look at people, land, and money, but you can also, where you're dealing with ranches, it's not unusual for me just to spend a fair amount of time understanding the livestock protocols, the livestock, how they manage the animals, whether they're grazing, whether they're feeding, whether they're in a feedlot. All those nuances come into play, and that's part of that holistic picture.
Very interesting. I appreciate that perspective of looking at the livestock under the finances, and then also on their impact on the land, and how we can make that a more profitable endeavor as we seek to put livestock out on that land resource and make it something that is a positive impact on that land resource rather than a negative impact on that land resource.
Exactly.
You mentioned that you had some success in Nebraska after returning from the holistic management course in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Can you describe some of that success that you were mentioning?
Yeah, I have successes and failures. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Has everything that I've worked with, every ranch, been successful? No, I've actually watched some ranches go bankrupt. Just because we weren't managing things holistically. I'll start with one ranch. I'm going to start with the failures, and then I'll jump to the successes, build on that. But I had one ranch that was very enthralled with some of Alan's grazing principles. I'm going to use that term. I was still working for the NRCS. They engaged my services. I helped them put in through advising consulting some of those things. They put in over 30 miles of cross fence, 15 miles of pipeline. When I started working with them, which was in 84, they were running 425 head of cattle. By 87, they were up to 725 head of cattle. We had a number of pasture walks, tours on this ranch, just because of the dramatic improvement in the health of the land and how it was able to increase its carrying capacity. Again, share an example of how we fail to look at things holistically. I never asked this client that I was working with how he was doing financially. He indicated he was struggling a little bit financially, but I didn't delve into the finances. And I was attending a meeting in 87, and he sits down beside me at a bar, and he looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's just got, this concerned expression that looks like things are not going well. And he sits down right beside me, but doesn't acknowledge my presence. So after about 5 minutes, I finally look at him going, "What's going on?" And he kind of scowls at me, and he reaches out, puts his hand around my shoulder, and pulls me close to him so we're nose to nose, and then he tells me the following message: "Roland, I really appreciate you helping me go broke." I discovered that week he declared bankruptcy. What I discovered is I skipped the meeting I was planning to go to because I was just shocked by this person's comment to me. Because, like I said, here I'd been espousing his success, and I knew it was going to be a black eye. As soon as people in the community learned that this person went bankrupt, they would blame holistic management and my management process that I was espousing and some of those things. And I skipped the meeting, and I found out, he told me right up front as we're visiting, he says, "Well, when I started working with you back in 84, I was losing over $75 in every calf that I was selling as a cow-calf producer. 4 years later, he's still losing over $75 in every calf he's selling. We all can do the arithmetic. If you lose $75 on 425 head, it'll give you a certain amount of money you've lost. If you do it on 725 head, the number is substantially bigger, and that hadn't changed first. And the bank finally has said enough is enough, and he went broke. And so I really want to stress that as you look at things on your ranch, and the same thing when you start defining your goals, is they have to be holistic in nature. You can't just have a myopic vision of, if we improve this, everything else around us will increase. If I go from 425 head of cattle to 725 head of cattle, everything in my life will improve. It may not if you don't look at everything and look at all the interconnection. Another ranch, like I said, I worked with multiple ranches that did increase their stocking rates substantially, but they did it more holistically. The Three Bar Cattle Company out of Nensel, which is right outside of Valentine, Nebraska. I did an interview with them 20 years later. I started working with this ranch in 85, and I've been doing this for 30-some years, and so the people in Albuquerque, New Mexico, asked me to go back and visit with some ranches that I started with 20 years ago, and so I visited the Three Bar Cattle Company out of Nensel, and I said, well, of all the changes that you've made that holistic management has helped you with, what has probably had the most profound effect? And this rancher told me that despite droughts, hailstorms, poor cattle markets, etc., but they started employing the financial planning processes that I teach my clients how to use. Since 85 to 205, this ranch has never lost any money. They've every year made a significant profit. Some years the profit was less than others, which you and I could understand as markets go up and down. And so that is one of the success stories that I can share. Is I'm working with like this Three Bar Cattle Company. I've had some fun working with the parents, and they are now bringing the next generation on board. They have 3 sons, and they've made room for their 3 sons through their profitability. They've allowed them to expand a little bit, and because of the profits, the sons want to come back. And so that's one of the challenges I see in agriculture today is I am 63 years old. I'm gray like a lot of the ranchers that are out there at 63 years old. And the concern I have is, I'm going to say at least 50, if not probably even significantly higher than that. People don't know what's going to happen to the ranch in the next 10, 20 years because the next generation is not on board. They're not excited about coming back to the farm or the ranch because it's not profitable. You have to work too hard. It's not rewarding, and the list can go on and on and on. So that's some of the challenges that we face as we look towards the future.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate the honesty, the upfrontness as far as successes and failures, and falls right in line with some of the things that I've been learning myself. That if you don't have the finances or the people management piece right, the livestock and land management kind of can be a moot point, because you're going to lose the ability to continue ranching if you haven't got those pieces kind of dialed in as well. So I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I've had to. I went to the University of Nebraska. I have a degree in range management, wildlife management, and for the first 10 years, I principally just focused on first five going on 10 years, focused on mainly just land management, grazing management. But through working with enough examples, I've had to. I'm going to call it self-educate myself. As I look at ranch operations, I'm going to say based on the last 30 years anyway, and again, as a paid consultant, I know I work with problem ranches, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I can tell you up front right now, over the last 20, 25 years, the weakest link in almost every ranch is either financial or people. And the grazing planning part, moving cattle, I call it fun and sexy. It gets me out in the air versus having to sit in my office in front of my computer, or sit down with my family or my employees and work with them and understand them and have them understand me. That's tough work, and it's not always easy.
Sure. Well, I appreciate your time very much today. We're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and talk about what we can do, or what it is that you do with these families in order to help them with these different processes to navigate successfully through all the challenges that come with operating a ranching operation. This episode has been brought to you by Kamak Ranch Supply. Check out their website at kamakranchsupply.com. Here's the deal about Kamak Ranch Supply. When you call and ask them about a product, there's no blank pause on the other end of the line because they don't understand the product that you just asked them about. If they are selling it, they understand it because they are producers, and Gary Kamak himself, the owner of Kamak Ranch Supply, is a producer. So if you want answers about the products you're calling to ask about from producers, call Kamak Ranch Supply or check out their website at kamakranchsupply.com. We're back with Roland Kroos of Crossroads Ranch Consulting. We've talked about some of the barriers that the typical ranching operation faces in successfully managing their ranching operation. What is it that you do that helps them overcome those barriers?
It depends on the level of communication, the level of trust and acceptance. I will usually sit down with some of the team members. It could be the father, it could be the son, it could be the daughter, the mother. Somebody will usually communicate with me about some of the challenges that they see on the ranch. And if there are communication breakdowns, I'll start trying to figure out what those may be. The base of all good communication is called trust and acceptance. Jack Gibb, who wrote Trust, The Missing Key, is a book, and that's what as he studied large corporations, small companies, small family businesses, and some of those things, he has found that if we do not trust one another, our communication is going to be guarded. We're going to be testing some of our ideas. We will not be openly, honestly expressing our concerns or what I may want to do with my life. And that, again, if it were a father-son operation and my father's expecting me to take over the operation and really hasn't even asked whether this is my passion and I get joy out of it, it's just it's expected. And I've, again, worked with some ranch operations, consulted with them. They've been through some of my holistic management training. They got, I'm going to say, a good team, but things are just falling through the cracks. And it's because one of them is, the father gave this ranch to his son, and I'd help him with the grazing plan. It would click and work for a while, and then it'd fall down. I'd help him with a financial plan. For a while it would work, and then the ranch again was losing money. And I finally just asked this young man, if you didn't have to manage this ranch, what would you be doing? And he explained and expressed something completely removed off the ranch. And once I realized that his heart and soul was not in on that ranch, I said, you can still own this ranch. I will find you a good manager. and do what you want, because right now with you doing what you're doing here on the ranch is not working anyway well. And so it goes back to part of it is really understanding people's passions, what makes them tick, what makes them really appreciate life. And that comes from an open ability to communicate and share our thoughts with one another. And if that's not working, we're going to have a very difficult time creating the holistic goal. Jack Gibb, again, has created, it's called a pyramid. The base of that pyramid, there's 4 bars across that pyramid. It's divided into 4 different quadrants. The base of that broad-based pyramid is trust and acceptance. The next one up is communication. Third one up is defining what I call that holistic goal, which a holistic goal includes everybody on your team. When I'm working with employees, I will challenge the managers of that ranch to bring the employees' wives to the table, because you may say, well, they don't have anything to do with the day-to-day operations, but they are the support mechanisms. If that wife is scolding, condescending to that employee and saying, I don't know why you work so hard, they don't appreciate you, they don't pay you enough, and you drag those dirty, bloody calves into my bathroom, make it a mess because we're calving in the middle of the wintertime, and that wife is not happy about it, she will let that employee know. And so after a constant amount of barrage and negativity, that employee may eventually leave. And versus I can get that wife involved and excited and part of the team, she will be a cheerleader. And that's what we all need in our life, is cheerleaders, whether they're actively involved in they don't have to be opening the gate on a daily basis, but I need somebody who will give me make me look at things positively. If they're saying, keep pushing a little harder, we're making progress. And so only way I know to get cheerleaders on board is to involve them in that goal-setting process, that they see their visions also equally expressed with the owners and the managers. And then we all work together as we make management changes, not to control you and I or one another, but to control the process, so that we are indeed making this ranch profitable. We are indeed making the land as healthy as it can be. We are indeed functioning at a very high, efficient level of getting the work done. It makes life fun.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate that perspective. So you mentioned trust and acceptance, communication, and then the goal-setting process. Is there anything else that you are typically working with ranches or ranchers on?
There is the very point of that triangle is called control. Again, having worked in the western United States, there's a fair amount of public land that a lot of ranchers will be. You yourself mentioned that your dad and you on your ranch is maybe grazing some public land, Forest Service or BLM land. And again, I'll call it typical turnout dates. It could be June 1, it could be May 1. Is the grass always at the same state of readiness to be grazed on the same given day based on an allotment management plan? I find the answer is no. And the same pull the animals off the land, could be October 1 or November 1, whatever it is we're given 2 dates. We're always mandated a certain amount of numbers. I find those dates control you or I. They really are not to the benefit of the resource, versus you and I have got a good set of eyes. You and I have a good level of trust and acceptance, so that what allows me to figure out when is the best time to turn out on this land. We will let the environment help dictate that, and we'll create flexibility, and for that flexibility we'll be rewarded. So you and I trust each other, whether I'm a public land servant and you're a rancher. I trust that you will do the best that we need to for that land, that you won't go out there and abuse it. So I don't have to create these, I'm going to call it federal mandates that try to control you. I've done that with a number of public managed ranches, or ranches that are operating on public land, let me put it that way. And I've created an unbelievable amount of flexibility by creating a collaborative management team where we all sit together and on an annual basis, we look at how the land is functioning, how the ranch is functioning economically. We look at things holistically, and we say, okay, what are the problems we're facing? If the land isn't as healthy as it needs to be, what are the changes we need to make in our grazing management to achieve, for the benefit of everyone, that holistic goal? And so how do we do that? And that's the process of control.
Yeah, that is the key a lot of times for ranches, especially ranches that are operating on a lot of leased ground, is that ability to control some of those key things that can be a catalyst towards improving soil health and improving production capacity and those kinds of things. So that's a very, I would imagine, a very important piece of that process.
It is, and that again, some agency people are a little hesitant, maybe even a little resistant to join. I call it this management team, but when we sit down and define that holistic goal, again, if we're operating on sizable BLM land, Forest Service land, I will request from that rancher. Usually, the rancher is the one that's paying my bill, but I've had some BLM Forest Service allotments kick in some money as well when we do this process of creating higher levels of trust and acceptance, defining our purpose, which is that holistic goal, and then defining how we accomplish that goal. What are the grazing mechanisms we think we need to use, livestock management mechanisms. So all that is kind of out in the open, and we have open sharing and dialogue, and if somebody sees something of concern, we openly express it. So then I'd rather have somebody up front tell me if they think it's not going to work versus subvertly thinking, okay, that they won't tell me up to my face, but then they constantly sabotage some of my planning efforts. I've actually, again, had some ranch managers come through my holistic management class. I've consulted with them, and then we go out and look at the land, and we're looking at the pastures, and we get to a gate that's not supposed to be open, and the gate is wide open, and the cattle are not in the pasture they're supposed to be at. And I'm looking at that gate, and we go talk to the employee, and the employee says, well, the cattle must open that gate. And I'm going, well, that's a pretty interesting cow. I want to meet that cow because that gate is swung all the way open. It's even pinned underneath the barbed wire so it doesn't, tangle on the cattle's legs. I've never seen a cow do that quite like that. I've seen gates trashed and, crumpled down there, massive pile of barbed wire all twisted together. I can tell that's a cow knocked that gate down, not a human being. And so that's, again, where you want to get the whole team at every level to work together. And when you do that, it is amazing what you can accomplish, how improving the land, the profitability, and just make our lives way more fun on a ranch. I mean, that's why most of us live in rural America, Western United States, is we enjoy our freedom and our flexibility, but we want to have some pleasure in life as well.
Sure. Goes right along with what we're doing here, trying to give people tools to increase the effectiveness and joy they receive from this lifestyle. So we've talked about kind of the process, I think, a little bit as far as communication, trust, and acceptance, and the control. What are some typical elements, just in the few minutes that we have remaining here, what are some typical elements of a holistic goal itself?
Well, one of the things I will stress up front is I'm going to encourage we all have, if the ranch team has been working together, especially if we're a family that's been living and working for a long time together, is we've got a history. And I'll just say, if you and I are two brothers and I don't like the direction of a meeting's going, I know I can say one or a couple words and it will, again, change directions of this. My recommendation is, and this is where, again, why people hire me, and that's why you and I have communicated a little bit on this, Clay, is I'd recommend hiring a facilitator. As a facilitator will keep you on track. It will keep you from getting derailed. And I've also had great success by getting some people who are maybe a little reluctant to participate. You may think a third-party person won't be able to get your mom and dad to open up, and I've had great success with that. I've had their kids tell me, how did you get mom and dad to say that? And as they're in the room, because, they've asked questions before, and they've gotten almost no response. And so I would highly encourage that you find somebody who's got some skills in facilitating team meetings and who understands how to help you create this holistic goal. And so that would be one of my upfront things. The key thing I'd also stress is that your holistic goals should be written down. Again, I've worked with some small husband-wife operations, and they think because they're so small, they really don't need to write the goal down, or tell each other what it is. And I had a father-daughter-son operation in Wyoming. I kept querying the father, saying, what's your holistic goal? And he had it well memorized. He was very clear. Mistake he made, he brought his daughter one time with him to one of my seminars as I was teaching, and I challenged her. I said, what's your dad's holistic goal? She goes, I don't know. She goes, I can't read his mind. And so that's the problem when you're working with more than one person is I'm very poor at it. I keep telling my associate and my wife that I keep flunking this reading mind test, I call it. And so you need to share with me what you want. And so that's, again, where a facilitator can really help you get it down. And then it should be written down as we are going to be faced with challenges of managing a ranch, whether it's animal health issues, whether it's a fire that's burnt half the ranch or the whole ranch down. During those times of crisis, our mind doesn't focus on the direction we want to go. It focuses on the crisis, and we get into crisis management. And I found, again, I've consulted with it. I've had several ranches significantly burned. We're almost 100% of the ranch, and I will show up, and the first thing I'll ask them is, where's your holistic goal? And they go, well, we need to look at the land. I go, no, I want to look at your holistic goal. So I make them methodically read through what their vision, what they want the landscape to look like. And I go, yes, we've had a disaster out there. We've lost some fences, we've burnt some trees, grass is gone. But will that fire really prevent you from attaining this vision? And as they ponder it, they go, no. Will it cause us pause? Absolutely, but it makes us refocus on where we want to go. And so whether it's a hailstorm, drought, market crashes, all those things, and we're bombarded on TV constantly with whether it's noxious weed issues, land health issues, or whatever it may be, that's where that goal will help us sort through and identify what are the right actions that I need to take. And so it's got to be written down. People with a holistic goal, I call it, I've been working with clients during droughts, market crashes, and they're still positive because they still feel they have control of the direction they're going, versus if you don't know where you're going, you feel wandering, you feel lost. And so having a clear vision, a direction. The other thing I tell people is take all the negative vocabulary out of your language. I had one client. This is, again, I'm going to call it a success story, but it's not as successful as I would like. I met this gentleman in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was out of Sheridan, Wyoming. He shared with me right up front he was in dire financial straits. He owed the bank $1.6 million, and the bank said his asset worth was $1.5, a little bit less than what his debt level was. And the bank wanted him to declare bankruptcy. He didn't want to give up. And so I consulted with him. He was relentless. He understood how to do the financial planning. I've never probably had anybody as driven as this person. I've written an article on him. His name was Charlie Whitten. He's out of Sheridan. But he understood how to do this. And like I said, I started working with him in '86. I met him. I was stopped in Wendy's in Sheridan for a quick bite-to-eat sandwich, and he was sitting there, and I was asking Charlie, I said, how's it going? He had a big smile on his face. He says, Roland, I got to tell you something. I just made my last payment to the bank. He worked himself in 6 years out of a $1.6 million debt. So you can do it, folks. I've worked with a number of people that have done something similar to that. The second part of the story is, as Paul Harvey would say, is I said, okay, now that you've done that, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, I've been thinking about that. And he says, because he had a myopic view. I asked Charlie what his goal was. He said, no debt. I want to get rid of the debt. And he did it, but he made his life so miserable for those 6 years as he kind of looked at it and goes, I now hate ranching. And he sold the ranch. And so, like I said, that's the second part of the story. And that's where I call it, I call it your holistic goal's got to be holistic. It has to define what makes you happy, what keeps you happy, what do you enjoy doing, and what part of ranching do you like, and what part of ranching maybe can we change? What are our financial aspirations? And then what do we want the land to look like? And it's called the triple bottom line. And for us to be really sustainable long term, we have to satisfy that triple bottom line. We can't just satisfy the financial, because you'll end up selling the ranch because you've made your life miserable. Or we can make the ranch profitable but literally destroy the landscape by doing it by mining it. I'm going to use that term. So your holistic goal has to be three facets, the triple bottom line, and that's what you need to spell out. What do we want this land to look like? What kind of lifestyle do we want to enjoy? We want to have time for our family. We want to go fishing with our sons and go to plays with our daughter and just have some fun. And again, I grew up on a farm in South Central Nebraska. I remember we were working 7 days a week, 10 to 14-hour days. And the old adage, I'm sure many of you heard the same thing, just to get ahead, son, you just got to work a little harder. And I looked at my dad and said, how much harder do I have to work? It's not working hard, it's working smart. And there are a lot of things we do in agriculture that are not necessary. I mean, they need to be done, but they don't need to be done right now. It'd be way more important to take your son fishing or your daughter out to a ballet play or something versus cleaning out the horse barn one more time. Some of those things. So.
Very, very helpful. I appreciate that so much. So much good stuff here today that we've had an opportunity to just kind of outline. I think really just skim the surface on that. I want to ask you one question. I want to clarify one thing, and then I want to ask you one more question, and then I'll let you go. I appreciate your time today. That triple bottom line you were just talking about, that is the bottom line as it relates to people, finances, and land. Do I understand that correctly?
That is exactly correct.
That's a very helpful paradigm, I think, that people can use to think about their operation, and I think that what we've done here today is give people just a little bit of a taste of an opportunity that might be out there for them to increase the joy that they receive from this lifestyle. So I appreciate that very much. As I let you go, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share with people how they can keep up with you. You mentioned that you had written an article. Is there a place where people can go to find articles that you have written? Are there resources that you would recommend? You've mentioned a book a couple of times, and that will be linked in the show notes page at workingcows.net/14. Workingcows.net/14 will have links to Roland's website and all those things. But are there some places people can go to find you and your articles and things like that?
Yeah, you're going to post my link to my website is just crossroadsranchconsulting.com. No spaces in between that, and you'll see there are case studies that we will post periodically. Also, we're on Facebook, and again, type in Crossroads Ranch Consulting, and that is where I will be posting almost on a daily basis. We're almost there now on a daily basis, posting success stories, comments, ideas, before and after pictures, seminars that are coming up. I'm right now going to be teaching 2 seminars, one at the Durham Ranch in Wyoming on February 20th through the 23rd, and then one in Wisconsin at North Star Bison, and that will be March 5th through the 8th. There's room in both seminars right now, and so if somebody would want to register, the Durham Ranch course, as you're saying, as I just realized, you said this might not come out till the end of January, but just have people get a hold of me right away. There's, again, the Facebook has got a comment section. People can email me at cruising@msn.com. It's KROOSING@msn.com, and would love to visit with you.
Very helpful. Thank you. And I will get that information about the Durham Ranch seminar out as soon as possible on my Facebook and some of maybe in the introduction to a show coming up, just to let people know about it. But it will also be in this show that will come out at workingcows.net/14. So appreciate your time today, and links to all that information, again, workingcows.net/14. Thanks for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Clay. I've enjoyed it.
This episode has been brought to you by Chris Williams Audio. Check out his website at chriswilliamsaudio.com. For the last 11 years or so, I've been talking for a living. I've gained some skills in talking. I can form a sentence, I can think on my feet, I can respond to questions, I can come up with new questions. All that time developing my speaking craft has not left me a lot of time to figure out how to make audio sound great. If you're a musician, podcaster, or filmmaker, making your product sound great is crucial. So you stick to what you know, and let Chris Williams stick to what he knows, making your product sound great. Head on over to chriswilliamsaudio.com for all your podcasting, music production, and film audio needs. I think there was a lot of good things there to chew on. I would encourage you to check out crossroadsranchconsulting.com, specifically their case studies section. A lot of good information there and some studies of different ranches and the impacts that they have been able to see through some holistic goal setting and some holistic management way of looking at things. Links to their website and all of the resources mentioned in the episode with Roland will be found at workingcows.net/14, workingcows.net/14. Next week, we have Joe Mills on the Working Cows podcast. Joe is a farmer and rancher from Indiana. He is known probably most widely on Twitter as @thehippiefarmer. and he's got some interesting ideas when it relates to marketing and resource management and some of those things. So I hope you'll tune in next week for my discussion with Joe Mills on the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.